Hi, I'm Ben, welcome back to my channel and to a rather large book haul. I wasn't quite sure what to film this week, and so I did put a poll up on my community tab, and a book haul is what you voted for, so a book haul is what you are getting today. I don't do book hauls too frequently on the channel. The last one I did, I think, was about 6 months ago in July, and so this covers books that I have acquired basically since then. I don't know if it's complete, there may be a few that I've missed, but there are quite a few to share. I actually went back and looked at my July haul and I went through the list of books and I had a few reflections on it really. One was that in that video I shared 30 books that I'd picked up. Kind of to my dismay, I've only read 6 of them since, which is quite frankly a little bit pathetic. I think I'm just a bit disappointed in myself for bringing so many books into my home and not really doing anything with them. Now the bad news for that line of thinking is that I've got more books to run through today, and there are a few valid reasons for that. Like, there are some library books included here. We've just had Christmas not long ago, and so there are some books that I've been gifted. And also, as the channel has grown, I've had like more books sent to me from publishers, which is super exciting, but it does displace other reading that I want to do. What I've kind of taken from that is that I want to read more of the books that I'm going to talk about today and not just let them languish on my shelves for weeks, months, dare I say years. So I'm hoping that although this is probably the first time you're going to see quite a few of these books, they will pop up again in the near future in reading wrap-ups. The other thing is that although I've acquired quite a few books, I'm also reading quite a lot, and so I don't think that I'm acquiring books way faster than I'm reading them. It's just that the number of unread books that I have at home isn't really going down. And so while I don't think I need to impose a full-on book buying ban, I do want to be maybe a little bit more conscious about the books that I choose to buy and the things that I spend my money on. Whether I actually do that is a completely different matter, but I feel like at least saying it on camera and putting it on the internet will hold me a little bit accountable. Anyway, that was a big old preamble, and you are here for the book, so let's get on with them, shall we? The first group of books that I want to talk about are the ones that I picked up from the library, mainly because those have got the biggest ticking clock on them and I might need to prioritise reading soonest. The first one of those is The Secret Lives of Church Ladies by Deesha Philyaw. This is a book of short stories about various church-going women and girls. It's set in the US. I'm not sure if the stories are interlinked or like they all go to the same church, or whether it's just the fact of going to church is something that links these women together, but I've not heard a single negative thing said about this book, so I'm very, very excited because I think a really good short story collection can just hit right. The only thing I will say about this is that not keen on the cover. I'm kind of bored of sexy fruit. So I'd like publishers to just leave that trend behind and give us some more creative, inventive covers. Then I've got Nonfiction by Julie Myerson, which ironically is not nonfiction, it's a novel. It looks quite short actually, the print is quite big, and I don't really know too much about it. The only thing I do know is that Amelia Barlow from Amelia Barlow Books really likes this one. I think she sent it as a gift to another booktuber. It might have been like Alice or Charlie Brooke. I can't remember, but I remember seeing it and thinking I was really intrigued by it. Almost certainly about like truth and fiction and what's real and what's not, and I absolutely jam with that at the moment. Interested to give this one a go if I can fit it in. Then finally from the library I picked up a copy of Pet by Catherine Chidgey. I actually almost recently bought this one because it's come out in like a smaller format paperback and it's got a black cover instead, which I think looks a lot nicer than this sort of mint green. Chidgey is a New Zealand author. She's previously been nominated for the Women's Prize for Remote Sympathy. This is a completely different book though. This is set in a school and I think it's about a young girl who's kind of starstruck by her teacher and wants to become her pet. And I believe there are like psychological thriller elements to it, lots of twists and turns. Also heard just really brilliant things about this. And so this out of the 3 is probably the one I'm most excited to get to, but we will see. I probably won't be able to read all 3 before I need to return them to the library. So I will have to do a little bit of hard thinking and hard choosing and decide which one I want to read. The next 3 books are ones that I've picked up which are like US editions of books, so ones that I've not been able to get my hands on, like the versions of them or them at all really in the UK. And the first of those is Northwards by Daniel Mason. I detest the UK cover, and so I had to get my hands on this big cat, kind of like verging on that like line of ugly art, but I think it's so captivating and so interesting. I just really like it, so I got it from eBay or Abe Books or something, one of those places that will send you US editions, and I still haven't read this. I'm kind of disappointed that I didn't read it last year because I've just heard amazing things about it. It's set over the course of about 300 years in the US. I think in like New England, and it's all centered around one house and the inhabitants of that house over time. Apparently amazing. I think it's a big contender for the Pulitzer Prize this year, and so I would like to read it sometime soon. Another book that I've seen a lot of positive buzz about on social media, but I don't think has had a proper UK release, is Same Bed, Different Dreams by Ed Park. I do not know tons about this, but I think it touches on like the Korean American experience. I think it's got sci-fi elements. It's set partly in the past and partly in the future. I actually don't want to know too much more about the plot of this because it sounds like my jam already, and I'd quite like to go into it blind and just discover what it's all about. And then finally a book that I have already read and have a copy of, but I have got another copy of it. One of my all-time favourites is Bewilderment by Richard Powers. This is not the book that is part of the haul. This is one that I've owned for years, and it is a signed copy. But I do think it's just such an ugly cover, and that's always upset me about this book. They did kind of correct it in the UK paperback, which is a very pretty edition, but I have always coveted the Canadian edition. And so recently, Matt started a new job working for a Canadian company, and he had to go out there for a couple of weeks before Christmas, and I saw it as a prime opportunity to get my hands on a Canadian edition of Bewilderment. And so Matt brought back with him this really gorgeous edition. I just think the colours are beautiful, and it more emphasises the like space aspect of the book. So the main character's job is like searching for exoplanets out in the galaxy. I just think it's gorgeous and I love it. I will cherish this copy, and if I ever do a reread, I think this is the one that I'll be diving into. The next books are ones that I've been given by other people for various reasons, which is kind of lovely, isn't it? The first three of which were given to me by my mum for Christmas. What a babe. Starting with The Shadow of the Wind by Carlos Ruiz Zafón. This was translated from Spanish by Lucia Graves. This is set in Barcelona, which in and of itself is pretty cool. I don't read too much fiction that is written in Spanish set in Spain. A lot of the Spanish fiction that I've read comes from Central and South America. But yeah, it's set in Spain, and I think it's about the magic of books and reading and spaces dedicated to books. But I believe that magic is something that is real in Zafón's Barcelona. Zafón sadly passed away a few years ago now, but really interestingly, this is part of a quartet of books which I understand you could read in any order. So that must have been just like a really interesting writing challenge to let the reader discover this world and all of its secrets in different ways and in different orders depending on which book you start with. I'm a traditionalist, so I've picked up the very first one. I did originally want to read this because my in-person book club was doing it, and sadly I did not get the time to read it before the meeting, so I didn't get to go along, but I heard there was a little bit of a mixed reaction about it. Outside of that, people who love it seem to really love it, so I've still got high hopes for this one, and I am intrigued to give it a go at some point. I was also given Ralph Ellison's The Invisible Man. This is from the 50s, and I think not to be confused, as I did for a long time, getting it mixed up with like a horror or sci-fi book called The Invisible Man, which was turned into a film not that long ago. This is actually about a black man in America in the 50s, I guess just before or like when America was on the cusp of the civil rights movement really taking off, but it's his experience of how invisible and ignored he is by society just because of the colour of his skin. It's a bit of a chunkster, it's held up as a classic, it's thought of as a very important novel for 20th century American literature, and I'm very excited to get into this one. Finally, my mum gave me a book that is very different from the last two, and that is Heartstopper Volume 5. This was only published a couple of months ago. It's the penultimate chapter in Nick and Charlie's story, and I read all 4 of the volumes that have been published to date last year, so I will read this one very soon, I'm sure. It's a very easy but heartwarming little read. I'm keen to learn what happens. Nick's obviously about to leave school. Charlie's been dealing with some of his own demons and is on the road to recovery for certain things, so I think this could get rather emotional. We'll see how it goes. The only other book that I received for Christmas was from Matt, and that was Beyond the Door of No Return by David Diop, translated from French by Sam Taylor. This is the most recently published book in English from the former winner of the International Booker Prize, David Diop. He won a couple of years ago for At Night All Blood is Black, which was absolutely phenomenal. This is a very different book, I'm led to believe, while that was like a quite brutal war story. This is a historical story set in Senegal. I know some people have been a little bit disappointed because they expected more of the same. I feel like I am now well and truly guarded against that disappointment, and so I will be going into this with my eyes open, and it will be pumped to the top of the list if it does get anywhere near the International Booker Prize long list, which should be coming out in a couple of months. We shall see. Right, the next book was one that I got for free from someone who lives on my street, because we have a very active WhatsApp group on our street, and it is full to the brim of people just wanting to give away stuff that they don't need anymore. And now and again there will be like a flat lay of books and people will say, do you want any of these books? Often the options are not very great, but someone on my street clearly has great taste, because hiding amongst the freebies was a copy of Zorrie by Laird Hunt. This is one that I've been wanting to read for quite a while. I think it falls into that category of fiction that's like quiet and pastoral and about someone just dealing with some like very quiet inner turmoil and going about their life and interacting with people around them. It was on my radar because I expected it to be a contender for the Pulitzer a few years ago, but even though it didn't end up turning out to be a finalist, it was still one that I was really intrigued by, and I almost picked it up when it came out in paperback, but I did not, and so it was lovely to get a little free copy. It's a very short read. I may give it a go at some point. I'm expecting it to be a book that gives me similar feels to like Lydia Millett's Dinosaur or Redhead by the Side of the Road by Anne Tyler, which I just recently read, hoping to love it. Finally, something happened that absolutely amazed me, and that was that I won a giveaway on Instagram. So a very lovely Instagrammer called Rio of Rio is Reading did a giveaway for Blue Monday, which is one of the Mondays in January. I can't remember if it's like the second Monday in January or something, which is apparently scientifically proven to be the saddest day of the year. And to cure Blue Monday, she did a giveaway, and somehow my name was put in the hat. Well, not somehow my name was put in the hat. I actually entered, so that's why it was there. But my name was in the hat, and somehow the spinner landed on me, and so I won the giveaway, and I could choose a book that I wanted to receive. And the one that I went for was 1984, Julia by Sandra Newman, which is a retelling of 1984 from the perspective of Julia, which is Winston Smith's love interest in that book. I'm super interested in this one because I quite enjoyed 1984. I didn't love it, the prose didn't quite click with me, but the story obviously very interesting, very influential, but also kind of pushes Julia to the sidelines, so it'd be cool to hear her side of the story. The book is also just gorgeous, and it is likely a contender for the Women's Prize this year, so it's nice to have a copy. Ooh, sorry, look at those end papers. That is really cool. Excited about this. I will definitely be giving it a go this year. The next group of books that I want to talk through are basically a bunch of books that I've picked up really cheaply, the majority of which, in fact all but one, are from my local bookshop that sells every book that they have for £4. They're all brand new copies, but I think they're like this common type of bookshop called a remainder bookshop, which is where a publisher might have a load of copies of books that they can't get rid of, but rather than pulp them, they send them off to these remainder bookshops, and the remainder bookshops can sell them quite cheaply, but still, I assume, at a profit. One small thing that sparks a little bit of joy for me at least, which has happened just by chance, is that the books that I've picked up from the £4 bookshop kind of make a lovely little rainbow in the orange and yellow space. You've got to take joy where you can find it. I'll zip through these quite quickly though. So the first one is The End We Start From by Megan Hunter. This is probably the most beautiful cover you will see in this haul. Very, very pretty, and it's also got French flaps, which I can never resist. This is like an addition to the climate fiction or cli-fi canon. It's about a woman who's a new mother who experiences the flooding of London in this like cataclysmic climate change event, and her experience of escaping that and what happens after. I have actually just read this, so I will be covering it in more detail in a coming wrap up. But yeah, actually really good. Then is Pleasantview by Celeste Mohammed. This is a Caribbean novel told in stories that apparently has just like a really great sense of voice. I don't know tons more than that about it, but I've seen it just recommended in quite a few places and by a few reviewers that I trust, and so I'm excited to give this one a go because I really do get a lot out of Caribbean literature. Some of my favourites over the last few years, not ones that have made like my top books of the year list, but ones that I've really enjoyed have been things like The Bread the Devil Need and If I Survive You. I've really enjoyed those books, and there's something about them that really like scratches an itch, so I think this could be a winner. Then I picked up a copy of The Friend by Sigrid Nunez. I know people have been talking quite a lot about her new book, The Vulnerables. This is a book that won the National Book Award. Not sure which year, but it's about a woman and her experience and friendship with a dog. I think Sigrid Nunez writes a lot about the relationships between people and animals, but I've heard that this is her best one. Again, with the French flaps. French flaps for £4. How can you even argue with that? Very intrigued. Then I got a copy of The Rain Heron by Robbie Arnott. I still have not read Limberlost, but I've heard amazing things about that. This is one of his previous novels before that. It has very good reviews on Goodreads. I don't know much more about it other than its Goodreads score, which I don't know if that's a sufficient reason to pick up a book. But sometimes it's nice to go in blind, you know. And again, very gorgeous cover there. Oh, and Australian fiction, because Robbie Arnott's Australian. Definitely not giving enough love to Australian fiction on this channel, and so maybe that will change in the months to come. Then Neil Patel's Tell Me How to Be. Again, another book that is very well regarded on Goodreads. This is a queer story about a man dealing with the fact that he wants to be a songwriter, but he's also dealing with alcoholism and coming to terms with his sexuality. It seems like it will be an emotional roller coaster, hit you like a ton of bricks. So very much looking forward to this. Oh, and it's filled with the beats of 90s R&B, which you may not believe it, but the sort of thing that I grew up on in East London. I think this will be a very good read. On to another National Book Award winner then, with Hell of a Book by Jason Mott. Oh, I've left the sticker on this one. I'll take it off later. This is a book about a man who has written like a bestseller and he goes on a book tour. I think it's got something in common with Percival Everett's Erasure, so I do want to read that one first, but I think this covers similar ground, perhaps not quite as well, but it'll be really interesting to see the different ways they approach that same thing. I like the idea of skewering the publishing industry. I think that's always a lot of fun. I think this has weirdly had no buzz in the UK whatsoever, but a bit more in the US. So yeah, it's going on the list. When will it get to the top? I don't know. Next is A Burning by Megha Majumdar. This is set in Kolkata in India. It is, I think, a multi-perspective book about different women in India and the things that they want to achieve, and it's got like a Dickensian sensibility about it. I'm not sure if I'm getting things mixed up, but this might be about terrorism. Yes, it's got some stuff about terrorism on the back as well. I think there's like a train attack that happens in this book. I remember being slightly aware of this when it was released because it had a really gorgeous hardback cover. This is also a very nice cover, and I could not resist when I saw it in the shop. On to some hardbacks that I picked up, which are also £4. Doesn't matter if it's hardback or a paperback. I got a copy of Sayaka Murata's Earthlings, translated from Japanese by Ginny Tapley Takamori, and this is signed too, so sometimes they pick up signed copies, which seems kind of crazy to me. I have been told to go into this completely blind and that it is completely fucked up. I have kind of had the premise ruined for me a little bit, but I'm not going to dive into it anymore. I'm just going to read it. It's not very long. I am happy to be creeped out. Then we have yet another winner of the National Book Award, and that is The Rabbit Hut by Tess Gunty. I don't know what it is about NBA winners that they all end up in the Remainders bookshop, but I'm glad for it because it means that I can tick some more of these off my list. This is a book that I had heard mixed things, but more recently I've heard like more and more positive things about. It's a book that is told, I don't want to call it a novel in stories because I'm not quite sure that is true, but it covers the lives of different residents of the same apartment block. And I do really like that idea, like this kaleidoscopic view of like one building can have so many different experiences and lives within it. I often think that when I'm just like walking along or like sitting on a train, I think, everyone's going about living their own independent lives with these really interesting stories, I'm sure. So yeah, this is the sort of ground that this covers. I'm really intrigued by that. I've heard that the writing is very good, a little bit MFA, but well worth a read. The last of the very cheap books that I wanted to talk about was Skippy Dies by Paul Murray, which I picked up in a charity shop for 50p, and this is like a pristine copy. I'm so pleased with this find. The inner bargain hunter in me is feeling very, very triumphant about this. I bought this because I just loved The Bee Sting so much, and I thought Paul Murray clearly knows how to tell a big family drama, and I think this is another big family drama. It's about two people called Skippy and Ruprecht, and Skippy obviously dies. I don't know any more beyond that, but I have the utmost faith in Paul Murray. This was also previously shortlisted for the Booker Prize, which is another big green tick for me. I think I'm going to save this for when I need like a deep emotional connection to a book, because that's exactly how I felt with The Bee Sting. Moving on then to some books that were sadly not 50p or not even £4. They were like regular priced books from my local bookshops, but ones that I've been really excited to pick up. The first of these is The Shards by Bret Easton Ellis. This has been a pretty divisive book. Some book reviewers that I follow have said that they hated this, but it also appeared on lots of booktubers and Instagrammers' top reads of the year. This is a sort of meta-fictional thriller about Bret Easton Ellis's own life and experience of writing Less Than Zero, his sort of breakout novel back in the 90s. And that's mashed up with this fictional serial killer that's stalking him and his friends. I think this is going to be right up my street, but I'm really intrigued to see which side of the line I fall on with it. Another pretty heavy read, but one that I've seen, I guess, people more universally say that they love, is On the Savage Side by Tiffany McDaniel. This is about the murder of some girls in a rural Ohioan town. I've heard that it's really emotionally devastating and really good for fans of A Little Life. I'm expecting this to be a little bit of a page turner as well. But yeah, always happy to be punched in the face by an emotional story, so we'll see how we get on with this one. Then a writer that I feel like I'm a bit of a failure as a reader not to have read yet, and that is Jesmyn Ward, and I picked up her book Salvage the Bones. I know nothing about this other than that it is, one, a winner of the National Book Award, seems to be a theme in this haul, but also that it's supposed to be really brilliant and among her best works. I will definitely be reading this one this year. The next book is a Japanese book that's on my radar because it's been adapted into a film, and that is Strangers by Taichi Yamada, and it's translated from Japanese by Wayne P. Lammers. This has been turned into the film All of Us Strangers, which I believe is not a direct adaptation, but more of a book that's like inspired by it and carries some of the same plot points, but doesn't really play out in quite the same way. This, I understand, is more of a ghost story. But yeah, I've seen the film. I loved the film. I thought it was really like emotionally arresting. It's like quite a quiet, subdued film that makes you think and makes you reflect on things about like family and connection and just what it means to be lonely. I think this reissue is gorgeous, and I am tempted to take this with me to Japan. I'm not quite sure yet, but I am going to have quite a bit of fun, I think, narrowing down the choices and seeing what I've got room for in my bag. But yeah, this is one that I will definitely be getting to soon. Next is a book from the indie publisher, the Indigo Press. I read 3 of their books last year, which were Riambel, Pearl and Between Dog and Wolf, and I really enjoyed all 3 of them. So I thought, pretty safe bet really to dive into another one of theirs. And so I picked up Joseph Zsigmond's Constance. This is a book told across 2 time periods, I think 2006 and sometime in the 2060s, before and after climate collapse. But I think it tells like a very personal, intimate story of one man and like his regrets and connections to someone else. I am increasingly interested in books that tackle the climate and climate collapse and the risks that brings, not just to like the everyday functioning of society, but also these really like personal, intimate implications it has. So I think this could be a real winner. Next is a book that I picked up because I keep seeing it on Instagram and people keep saying how good it is, and that is This Country Will Bring Us No Peace by Mathieu Simard, translated from French by Pablo Strauss. This isn't from France, this is from French Canada, I believe, and it's about a couple who are struggling to have a baby, and so to get away from some of the stresses that they're experiencing, they move to the country. And I think some weird stuff's going on. A lot of the local amenities have shut down and there's been a mast erected and people are experiencing kind of weird stuff. So I'm expecting this to be a little bit of like an unsettling read. Doubt we're going to get the answers. We never do in books like this. But I'm hoping for a really good evocation of like a creepy mood and atmosphere. We shall see. Then a book published by Influx Press. Actually, that last one was also published by Influx Press. But Influx have recently republished all of the works from a gay author who lived in Birmingham called Joel Lane, who sadly died. And I picked up one of these just because I was really intrigued, and I do want to read a little bit more gay literature because I don't read enough of it despite my own afflictions. This is The Blue Mask, and this is about a man called Neil who suffers like quite a life-changing injury to his face, and it's about his sort of road to recovery and his experience of the world. I think this will be a very interesting book that I'm expecting, for some reason, I don't know why, I'm expecting it to have the same sort of vibe as stuff like Boy Parts or some of Bret Easton Ellis's work. I think it's going to be like messy young person goes on quite a self-destructive path, and we see them either grow or not. I don't know. Last book in this little tranche is Adam Byles' Beasts of England. This, actually, like Julia, is another book inspired very much by the works of George Orwell. I don't think it's a retelling of Animal Farm. I think it's supposed to be seen as a sequel to Animal Farm, but it tackles some of the things facing our modern age. And so you see, like, I think Boris Johnson and Donald Trump satirised in this. Rachel Cusk and Harry Kunzro like it, so hopefully I will as well. I'm starting to feel like this video is getting quite long, and I'm conscious of the fact that I'm the one who has to edit it. You're the one who has to watch it. For the sake of both of us, I'm going to pick up the pace a little bit. And we're moving on to hardback books that I've picked up. The first of which is Orbital by Samantha Harvey. It has a very gorgeous cover. It's a book that explores the experience of a few people up in space, I think on the International Space Station or like a similar ship to it, as they go around the Earth 16 times and just go about their mundane business of being astronauts and their reflections on being able to see the Earth from such a distance. Sounds very quiet and calm and wonderful, and the sort of thing that I really enjoy. Then another tiny little book really, which is Three Fires by Denise Mina. I picked this up because I just absolutely loved Rizzio, which was another short historical novel. This one is set in 15th century Florence and covers the events leading up to the bonfire of the Vanities. I think it makes some parallels with our modern day, so it'd be really interesting to see what she does with that. I really enjoyed how she mashed up historical fiction with modern sensibilities in Rizzio, and I think she's doing the same thing with this one, so yeah, really excited for this. Then a very recent release which I saw online, I hadn't heard of before, but it just spoke to me and I couldn't resist, so I went out and got myself a copy from Waterstones, and that is Glorious Exploits by Ferdia Lennon. This is a book set in the 400s BC in Sicily and follows like a catastrophic invasion attempt by Athens of Sicily. It's set in Syracuse and it follows these two men who, I don't know how, but they end up trying to put on a play, like a Euripides play, with a bunch of Athenian soldiers who are starving and stuck in Sicily. It's supposed to be really, really funny. It's supposed to say a lot about like war and brotherhood, and I'm just really excited for this one. I think it sounds absolutely glorious. Of course it does. Then a book which I want to say is a dystopia, but I saw Eric Carl Anderson call it a utopia. That is The Land of Milk and Honey by C. Pam Jong. This is set in a near distant future, and I think it's set after some climate disaster. Yeah, there's a smog and it's ruined lots of crops and it's caused a big ecological issue. But I think it's about a chef who goes to this basically haven of luxury where she works to feed some of the inhabitants there, and I think it's supposed to be quite sensual and it's about the joys of food, but also quite unsettling. And speaking of unsettling, I really like this cover. I like the image that's used, but I have no idea what I'm looking at. Like, it's clearly part of a body and this looks like a knee, but then I have no idea what this is. Does anyone know? Can anyone explain to me the anatomy of this shot? Because it's freaking me out a little bit, but kind of in a good way. Then we've got Impossible Creatures by Catherine Rundell. This is a like kids fantasy book. It was the Waterstones book of the year and it beat out like all of their adult books as well. It appeared on a bunch of like best of the year lists, and I've just heard it's like really fun, really magical. Catherine Rundell seems to be excelling in everything she does, and I imagine there's going to be like lots of fun real facts or tidbits about animals that are from our actual real world, because she wrote The Golden Mole and I think writes really magically just about creatures that we know. So turning that into something more imaginative. It's going to be really fun. I don't know if this is the start of a series, but I'm going to give it a go and see how I feel about it, because I've not read a book like this in a really long time. Then I've got a copy of Brian Washington's Family Meal. Picked this up in a sale after Christmas. This is about a man whose partner has died and then he moves back to his hometown, kind of reconnects with an old friend. I think it's about grief and friendship and like how do you bridge the gap between someone you were really close to who you haven't spoken to or seen for a really long time. I think it's going to be like quite an emotionally taxing read, but as ever, I do love that. And then finally, a book I picked up a while ago but just haven't gotten around to reading yet is Richard T. Kelly's The Black Eden. Now, I'm not going to lie, I was very drawn in by the fact that this is a super striking cover. This is set in the 50s in Scotland and is basically about oil in the North Sea and how it has these like dramatic impacts on people's lives and their personal relationships. And I think it covers various different people's lives. It sounds very intriguing. Just love the look of it, really. And I think it sounds like it could be a really interesting book. Okay, we are at last on to the final section, and these are books that have been sent to me by publishers. The first 5 of these are ones that I've already talked about in a really recent video, which is the books that I'm looking forward to in 2024. And those are The Night Alphabet by Joelle Taylor, Mongrel by Hanako Footman, The Borrowed Hills by Scott Preston, Martyr by Kaveh Akbar, and James by Percival Everett. If you want to hear about any of these books in a little bit more detail, I will link that video in the description where I talk through what they're about and why I'm excited about them. There are a couple of other books that I've been sent that I just want to tell you a little bit about, which I haven't covered in that other video, starting with Cinema Love by Jia-Ming Tang, published by John Murray Press. This is a book set in New York, in Chinatown, about some Chinese immigrants who are gay, and they are, I don't know if they're friends or in a relationship, but they've known each other for a really long time, from the time back when they lived in China before they emigrated, and it covers their experience in China of trying to live their lives and be who they are as gay people in an environment where that wasn't acceptable. So the Cinema Love it refers to is where they used to go to an old cinema where they lived, and they would go cruising and have sexual experiences with other men while films played in the building. It sounds like a really interesting exploration of what it means where being yourself is a taboo and how you overcome that, and even when you move to an environment that is more accepting, how that might have long-term impacts on you and your relationships to other people. I think this sounds like it could pack a real emotional punch. So yeah, sounds really interesting. Oh, and I should say it comes out in May. Then a book that comes out really soon, so this comes out in February in the UK, I think February the 15th, and that is How I Won a Nobel Prize by Julius Taranto. This is about a fictional island where people, particularly academics who are cancelled, can go and continue their research. This is one that I read this month, and it is really good, really funny. I will review it in more depth in my wrap-up next week. I don't often get sent books that I have not requested specifically, but this is one of them. This is a book coming out in July, and this is Anyone's Ghost by August Thompson. I don't know tons about it, but the first line of the book is on the back, and that is, "It took 3 car crashes to kill Jake." Intriguing, huh? I think this is a story about gay romance. Is it romance if there's murder involved? I don't know. Oh yeah, it does say, "An overwhelmingly beautiful love story. This book will make you cry." I don't know much about it. I quite like this proof cover. I am curious to explore what it has to offer. Comes out in July. And then finally, a book that I was sent a finished copy of last year, and I really wish I'd read by now because all I hear are rave reviews about this, and it is The Heaven and Earth Grocery Store by James McBride. This is a story that covers the experience of both the Black and Jewish communities. I'm not sure where it's set. It's in Pennsylvania, and I think it starts off with some digging for construction that happens, and they find some skeleton, and there's a little bit of a mystery about where that skeleton's come from, the background behind it, what happened in that area. This is featured on so many people's like best books of the year lists, and I think there's this thing, I can't remember what publication does it, but it goes through all of like the best books of the year lists published by magazines and literary journals and stuff, and tots up how many lists different books appeared on, and I think this is the book that appeared on the most best of the year lists. So I think I'm in for a treat when I do get round to it. Very, very excited to do so. Wow, that took quite a while, didn't it? It was really fun to run through all of these books. I would love to hear if there are any on this list that you have read and you think I should prioritise soon, or if there are any books that you've picked up recently that you're also very excited about. Please do let me know down in the comments. But until next time, toodles.